Hi folks, so this is Lauren Steiner here on Facebook Live, and I'm actually having to do this from my phone. If it's a little shaky, this is why. So this video is about the Iowa caucus fiasco. The reason I'm doing this video is I think there's been a lot of panicking. I mean, yes, it was a total shit show, but I don't really think it's as bad for Bernie Sanders as people are saying. As people know, the biggest problem last night was that they didn't report any results. And all of us Bernie supporters were expecting him to win, so therefore it was very disappointing. Right away, everybody was starting to come up with, and I use the word conspiracy theories, and I was criticized for using that because a conspiracy theorist is, it's a way to make something sound negative. And obviously a lot of legitimate things can happen. Like, I totally believe that the election in 2016 was rigged, and I don't think that's a conspiracy theory. I think there's empirical evidence for that. But I want to go through the evidence of what happened last night to say why I don't think this was a conspiracy by Mayor Pete. Basically, the story that we got last night was that they couldn't report results because there were problems downloading the app from the precinct captains to their personal cell phones and then uploading some data. And then there were some coding errors as to why the data didn't get uploaded properly. Obviously, they should have reported that sooner because people were getting all paranoid because it took them so long just to report that fact. Bernie Sanders actually had his own app, and he reported some numbers last night with 40% showing that he did in fact win. Basically saying he didn't win the whole thing because obviously they need to have the numbers in, but based on 40% of the precincts that he recorded, because his precinct captains there were asked to upload it to the app, the Bernie app, that Bernie was in the lead at that point. And everybody was, just talking about how awful this was and how it looked bad. I was watching the corporate media last night, but I was also on Twitter. And Lee Fang, who's a reporter for The Intercept, and I was hoping to have him on this show today, did some great reporting about this firm called Shadow, which made the app. And at first people were saying that Robbie Mook developed it, and then he denied responsibility. He developed some other app, apparently, and even Lee Fang, in his reporting, said that there was no evidence that Robbie Mook developed this app. Alex Michelson last night, who's my favorite Los Angeles reporter, was saying that Bernie, well, he wasn't saying Bernie, he was saying that the candidates should come on and say something and take advantage of all that dead air time, which I thought was a great point. And then finally, I think Amy Klobuchar was the first one to come on, and then Bernie, and then Warren, and then Buttigieg, which of course he declared victory, which was shocking to all of us, seeing as there was 0% of the results reported. So today, Bernie reported 60% of the results, and the Iowa Democratic Party at around 2 p.m. Pacific time, which is my time zone, reported 62%, and there is a discrepancy. And these are the percentage by which the delegates would be awarded. Klobuchar had 12.6 and Yang had 1.1. These numbers actually changed even since the IDP reported. It says that it's 62.3%, so this doesn't even really align with what the Iowa Democratic Party reported at 62%. When they reported these results, John King on CNN did some analysis of how they ended up, at least with the Iowa Democratic Party votes. They did say that, of course, Bernie Sanders had the most popular votes, 28,220, with Buttigieg having 27,030. But the way it works, and this is why the process was much more transparent this time, so at least there was an improvement. You have the first count. And people who were watching my stream last night, I had Mike Ferguson report remotely from a precinct in Des Moines, and you could see that the people cluster over into an area for each of the candidates, and then they count them. But what I also found out, thanks to George No, is that there were actually paper ballots. It wasn't just a paper trail, which is what I thought it was. They counted up everybody's who was supporting a candidate and wrote the number down, the raw number down on a piece of paper that all the campaigns got to sign off on. But apparently each person was handed a piece of paper in which they put their first and second choice on there. So there is a paper ballot to be audited. The way it worked was they have the first count, and then they have what's called a realignment. So candidates that were not viable, candidates that got under 15% of the vote, would realign to another candidate. And this is why Buttigieg did better, because according to John King's analysis, after that first vote, Bernie got 1,132 people moved over to Bernie, 3,364 people moved over to Buttigieg, 1,406 people moved over to Warren, and Biden lost 2,003 people. And Klobuchar lost 675. Yang lost the most, 4,636. And Steyer lost 1,657. So what that shows me is that with Buttigieg getting more votes in the second round, that, first of all, what we heard about Yang voters going to Bernie was not uniformly true, because obviously a lot of those 4,636 went over to Buttigieg. Warren was viable, so she didn't lose any votes in I don't think any of the precincts. Now, she didn't win any of the counties. John King showed that. But she had a very good organization, and she was able to place in all the counties. So that kind of went against Nathan Robinson's theory, which I don't want to get into his whole theory. But, his theory was that Warren was really going to hurt Bernie. And, that may have been the case if you think that Warren voters are, progressive uniformly. But in reality, Biden voters, the second choice of Biden voters, are Bernie. So this is all going to help Bernie. Bernie was disappointed in the turnout. Now, he was interviewed on a plane going to New Hampshire. And he said that while the turnout was a little bit bigger than 2016, it really wasn't what they had hoped for. So I think that's why we don't see Bernie with a bigger lead. But I personally think when these votes are all counted, Bernie is going to probably win the popular vote and maybe tie in the delegate vote. Now, let me explain to you why the delegate vote doesn't reflect the popular vote. Because after the realignment, and there was a guy by the name of Sean Sebastian, who was a precinct captain, who was on Wolf Blitzer last night. I was watching him, and he was reporting on how he was on hold for an hour and a half trying to report his results by telephone, which was the old way they used to do it, and was the fallback way for if there were any problems with the app. So he just started tweeting them out on Twitter, and Van Jones even noticed this and talked about it on CNN. So while Sean Sebastian was on the phone with Wolf Blitzer, apparently after an hour and a half, the Iowa Democratic Party finally picked up the phone, and he's trying to say goodbye to Blitzer, but because he didn't acknowledge them on the phone soon enough, they hung up, and he had to call back in again. But he was talking about Bernie getting like 111 votes, and then Buttigieg getting 66, and Warren getting 44. Don't hold me to those numbers, but I think it was like that. And in the end, them each getting like 2 delegates each. So everybody's saying, why is this? And why this is because of this formula that they use with Caucus. It's called Caucus math. And what they do is they have to count up all of the voters that voted that day, even the non-viable voters, for a total number of voters. And then they divide the number that you get when the realignment happened into that total number, and that's how you get the percentages. And there's only a certain number of delegates to be awarded from each precinct, so that's how they divide them up. So that's the process that's really unfair. I don't think there was anything rigged per se against Bernie with those numbers. Now, I can't speak to the coin tosses. I was not there. I don't know if people were cheating on the coin toss. It seems to me that there were eyes on these coins, and I don't think they'd be able to get away with it. But the idea of a coin toss itself is kind of preposterous. So I think if people have issues with this, they need to talk to the state parties that allow the caucuses. But quite frankly, I feel after this debacle and after what is going to be a shit show in Nevada, they're probably going to get rid of these caucuses. And people are saying that if they don't, the DNC and the Democratic Party is dead. I think Emma Vigeland tweeted out something like that. And I think that's a little bit hyperbolic, but it surely does not make the party look very good to have a process like what happened last night. So I think really what the result is that Bernie was denied a bit of momentum is what happened, because he wasn't allowed to go on, TV last night and claim victory. Pete claimed victory, and the mainstream media, didn't have to deal with a Bernie victory. So Pete declared it a win last night. And today, the corporate media are basically praising him for doing such a good job, for organizing so well in Iowa, that he was able to, eke out this victory, even though they're saying it can't be said it's a victory yet because it's only 62%, that he had a great ground game because of how many people he got, with the realignment, how many voters he got from realignment. So now the media, of course, today is underplaying Bernie's popular victory, even going as far as to say, John King said this on CNN, that in 6 of the 10 counties he won in 2016, someone else won it, last night. And this is not surprising because in 2016, he was the only candidate against Hillary Clinton. Obviously, if you have other candidates, they're going to win some counties. And it seems to me that, Bernie, Buttigieg, and Warren all had great ground games in Iowa, and Biden did not to mention the fact that Biden has, older voters. But the turnout is problematic. To me, that's the biggest problem as a result of last night. I just feel that some of these young people are just not reliable. This is what happened in 2016. 70 to 90% of young people preferred Bernie, but only 20% of them turned out. So this is why they work so hard to, staff the colleges. And I don't know what it's going to take, but, maybe lessons learned. They'll try to figure this out, they'll debrief, and they'll see what they need to do going forward. The media are talking about how bad this looks for Biden. And a publication called This Week ran a story saying this benefits Bernie because Biden tanking means Bernie will do better because he's the second choice of Biden voters. And that Pete will bomb in South Carolina and Nevada and any place where there are people of color. And it was also interesting to note that there was a story written about how Pete Buttigieg had, there were like 4 black women that were moved from his crowd behind him to the front row so that they could be seen in the camera angle. And one of the women even tweeted about this, hashtag tokenism. She wasn't really happy about that. So I think it's really clear to everybody that, Pete is going to be out after Super Tuesday. So my real worry about this whole thing is Bloomberg, because Bloomberg is clearly buying his way. And yesterday in my live stream, I talked about how he was here in Compton yesterday, which is historically an African-American community. Now they may have more Latinos than African-Americans, but he got the endorsement of the African-American mayor and some of the African-American city council members. And he's buying, he's hiring like 5,000 staffers, I think I read today. I mean, his money knows no bounds. So that's who I think we really have to worry about. Okay, so let me just say what some of the things were on my Facebook message today. Stasha K, or was it Share a Secret? I wish I knew what Share a Secret's real name was. It might have been her. The poll didn't get released showing that Biden won. That Bernie won. And, that was because apparently some callers did not hear Pete's name mentioned. So there was a connection to Pete there. The campaign captains are saying that the numbers they put in are not showing up correctly and that 200 votes were switched to Pete. Now, the first part we heard that they weren't showing up correctly. That was the coding error. But I haven't seen anything, and I asked her for a screenshot of some precinct captain posting that these 200 votes went to Pete, and I haven't heard anything back from her. So until I see direct evidence from a precinct captain saying that, I'm going to discount that. They said the Pete is connected to the app, and yes, that is true. I'm going to talk about how that is in a minute, because I'm going to report on Lee Fang's reporting since he isn't able to be on my show. But, since the app didn't work and there was a paper trail, he doesn't benefit from having spent $40,000 on this app because they're releasing the counts from the paper trail. And they say that he was the only one in the meeting with the DNC to stop Bernie. Now, I don't know anything about that. I don't know who was there. I don't know who wasn't there. So I can't really comment on that. The other thing is that the results may be delegitimized. But the results are not going to be delegitimized by Pete because he's thinking that he won. And if he didn't win, even if he tied in delegates and he got a few thousand lower than Bernie in the popular vote, that's still a win for someone like him. So really, the person who's going to be delegitimizing this, or is going to try to, is Biden, because he already had, his lawyers write a letter casting doubt on this system. We're going to see if he's going to challenge it when it's finally released. So let me go into what Lee Fang was reporting. So he was talking about this company, Shadow, which made the app. Everybody knows it was called Shadow. And somebody on Twitter said, if you really want to have confidence in your app, you wouldn't name it Shadow, which I thought was very funny and true. The parent company is a company called Acronym, although actually I think Acronym is an investor. And last night I had one of my more popular tweets because I happened to be watching Chris Hayes when he had David Plouffe, and everybody knows David Plouffe was a consultant to Obama, worked on his campaigns. And he is on the board of this parent company or investor company, Acronym, which makes these apps and digital marketing and tools for campaigns, mostly started by mostly Hillary staffers. And the idea was to compete with, Donald Trump's excellent use of digital marketing. And he was asked if he knew anything about this. And he said he didn't know about it. And so I reminded me of the scene with Claude Rains in Casablanca, where he says, I'm gambling going on? I'm shocked there's gambling going on. Or Colonel Klink in Hogan's Heroes, who said, I know nothing, I see nothing. And of course, somebody had to remind me that that was Sergeant Schultz. And I said, look, after 50 years, I haven't seen that show in 50 years. It's pretty good that I even remembered Colonel Klink. But the point is, he was denying it, and Chris Hayes was sort of letting him off the hook. Shadow, which is the company that made the app, was funded by the Iowa Democratic Party and the Nevada Democratic Party, and also people who contributed was Pete Buttigieg. He contributed $40,000 to it. But guess what? So did Kristen Gillibrand. I don't have the number that she contributed, but she was one of the ones. And I think Biden contributed $1,200 for their text messaging service. So he wasn't a major contributor to this. But the CEO is somebody by the name of Tara McGowan. She is married to a senior strategist for Pete Buttigieg's campaign. Apparently, there's 3 companies involved: Lockwood Strategies, FWIW Media, and Shadow. And they have this unified structure. And their top officials expressed hostility towards Bernie Sanders supporters. Lee Fang, who is a great investigative journalist, says, and I'm quoting him directly here, he says, there is no evidence that their preference had any effect on the coding issues. And let me say again, I concur with that because that's not how these results were ultimately released. They were released based on the paper counts. Apparently, Bernie Sanders' precinct captain, who didn't want to be named in the article, said they didn't know about the app until last month, and they didn't have access until 3 days ago. So the app, it was collecting data, but it was only reporting out partial data due to this coding area. I already mentioned that. He also reports that Acronym is a hybrid model of a 501c4, which they don't have to disclose their donors, and a super PAC that does. And these 2 investment banker guys, Donald Sussman, who you might know, his daughter Emily Sussman is one of those one of those Bernie bashers, one of those women liberals like Zerlina Maxwell and Mimi Roca and Joy Reid, who bash Bernie. Emily Sussman, MT Suss on Twitter. So her dad, Michael Moritz, donated $1 million each. Spielberg donated $500,000, and this former Republican donor gave $1.5 million. Now, in my opinion, the story here with this it's just like what Nomiki Konst reports about the Democratic consultants. These are people making money from the Democratic Party. And again, it goes to show you that paper ballots and doing things the old-fashioned way is the best way to run these elections. And there were so many people on Twitter saying this is not complicated stuff. People who develop apps like Shaikat Chakravarti, who was AOC's campaign manager. That's what he does. He develops apps. And he said this is ridiculous that this should be so bad. So if I were one of these investors that spent all this money on this, I'd be pretty pissed off right now. So I don't really think that these conspiracy theories, or these theories, if you don't want to call them conspiracy theories, really hold a lot of water. Because the app did not screw things up for Bernie. Even Pete Buttigieg's precinct captain counts kind of matched with Bernie's, and will ultimately match with, I think, what the Iowa Democratic Party. I mean, I think either Bernie will win the popular vote, and Bernie may even win the delegate vote. But because of the way these delegates vote, as I explained to you, it may be even. And so right now it's 10 delegates for Bernie, 10 delegates for Pete, and 4 delegates for Warren. So it's not so much the delegates. The big story of last night in my mind was the momentum, the fact that Bernie couldn't give his victory speech, the fact that the mainstream media didn't have to deal with Bernie winning, and also the big story to me was the turnout wasn't as great as the Bernie campaign thought it would be, which is what I think is worrisome. But I think the fact that Biden did do so badly and was not viable in many places should at some point get more notice by the media and also by the voters, and so that Bloomberg ultimately becomes Bernie's biggest competition. And we'll talk about Warren in another show, because I really do want to have Nathan Robinson on to talk about how she, even though she's preaching unity, how her staying in the race without being able to win, even though she got delegates last night, is ultimately going to hurt Bernie, at least with progressives who support Warren. And I really think that, like I said, more Bernie voters are to be found in Biden supporters, maybe even, than Warren supporters. But we have to look into that. So what I want to talk about is the Nevada situation, because Nevada is going to be a big problem. Now, they did announce that they're not going to use that app, thank God. But Nevada was a problem last time, as we all know. And Dave Dayen, who was on my show, reporter for American Prospect, actually he's the editor of American Prospect, posted something about Nevada's in trouble. They're looking for people from California to be precinct captains because they can't get anyone. So I posted this on my Facebook page, and I tagged Christine Kramer and Angie Morelli. Angie Morelli was on my show when we were talking about the delegate selection process in Nevada last year with her fellow Bernie delegate, Rob Kern, who's an attorney, and they were working on the delegate selection process, which is going to be another whole way that they're probably going to screw Bernie. But I asked her if she would be on my show to discuss this, and she said they legit have had everyone who signed up quit. The training is terrible. They have changed the rules, and everyone knows it's going to be a shit show. So everyone I know who is going to run precincts, including me, have stepped away and no longer give a fuck. Now, this is a major, major Bernie super volunteer and delegate. And she and I stayed in close touch in 2016. And the fact that she's saying she doesn't give a fuck is really problematic. And I know that Christine Kramer has some real issues with the Bernie campaign and suspicions with who is the state director there, this Peter Koltak, who was part of the Obama campaign and part of the Harry Reid crew. So we know that Harry Reid pretended to be neutral in Nevada, but he and Bernie always calls him my friend Harry Reid, and the Culinary Workers Union didn't endorse anyone, and that was considered a major victory for the Bernie campaign. But we know that Harry Reid called up the head of the Culinary Workers Union the night before the Nevada caucus and told them, he said, you better get your members to caucus for Hillary. And then he called the heads of all the casinos, the owners of the casinos, and said, you better give your workers a day off with pay. And so that was, we talked to workers. I was in Nevada, and they said, I would love to caucus for Bernie, but I can't get the day off. So the fact that these culinary workers all got the day off with pay, and even if they wanted to caucus for Bernie because they knew that their union bosses, their union leaders would be watching them because it's an open process, they had to caucus for Hillary. So now, one thing that Amy Villela told me was that they have these, you can caucus remotely, so people aren't watching you caucus, but the thing is your caucus vote is recorded, apparently, according to Christine Kramer. So then Megan Ortiz wrote this. In 2016, they were scrambling, even the night before the caucus, to get people assigned as precinct chairs. I received 0 training sessions. I was given a booklet the night before and told to study it. They were spread thin and had me double as a site coordinator and a precinct chair. Even just educating myself on the rules, I was informed enough to realize the following morning that I was seeing countless laws being broken by other precinct chairs and precinct captains, etc. Realized it was a sham of a process with inauthentic results. The majority of the people conducting it either had no idea what they were doing or didn't care, and there's very little oversight and accountability. When voters aren't aware of the rules and protocols, it's the blind leading the blind. So this is very concerning. And then Rebecca Sanders writes, I was there as an observer in 2016. It was a shit show. They made Bernie supporters stand in long lines to get into sites. Hillary folks got to cut the line, and I know that did happen in Las Vegas. This discouraged many Bernie voters, especially those that had to go to work. Lots of folks left before getting inside, and others left before the final count because it was taking too long, dragged out and delayed on purpose by Hillary Clinton folks. The precinct captains for Bernie were young and inexperienced. The Hillary folks were older and bullied the Bernie folks. In the casino caucuses, many non-citizens were corralled by Hillary folks and allowed to participate. And I totally remember that happening. Now, I was in a site in Las Vegas, and I want to say it was all on the up and up. We had 4 different precincts in this elementary school. The site coordinator was a Hillary supporter, but her husband was a Bernie supporter? Yeah. And I think her daughter was a Bernie supporter too. But in any case, I was in one of the precincts, and it was very fair, and the numbers divided evenly for Bernie and Hillary. So I didn't have, my experience that I was monitoring was not a shit show experience at all, but other people's clearly were. So what I want people to get out of this video is forget about Iowa. That's history. What we need to concentrate is on Nevada, okay? Because Nevada is very corrupt. And whether you're worried about, Hillary infiltrators, establishment infiltrators in Bernie's campaign, like Christine Kramer is, or whether you're just worried about their horrible caucus process and training, I am going to suggest, and I have suggested this to the leaders of the Bernie Sanders Metro Squad here in Los Angeles, that we all volunteer to be precinct captains, that Berners from California, since they're looking for people from California, we volunteer to be precinct captains, and we get trained up very, very well so that we make sure these things don't happen. I mean, I think that's something that's within our control, and we certainly ought to be able to do it. I mean, I know that California played an outsized role in getting people to go to Las Vegas and canvass, to go to Nevada and canvass, and I'm going to contact Margaret Okazumi on this because she was coordinating people from Northern California. So I don't see why there's any reason that we can't get people to go and be precinct captains.